The Tardy Sweep. This story happened when I was just a freshman in high school. It was December 14th, the last day before Christmas break. I had transferred to Redwood High School only the month before, in November, so I was still the new kid. I didn't have too many friends yet, and I barely knew where all my classes were located. In California, a lot of high schools are outside, which was different for me since my old middle school and high school were fully indoors where I lived on the East Coast. So every day I checked a map and my class schedule that the office gave me, and I looked through all the buildings to see where I was supposed to go. The worst part of my day was when I had to go from the third to the fourth period. Third period was gym class, far out at the west end of campus. Fourth period was English class with Mrs. Hullab in the 200 building. That was on the opposite end. Mrs. Hullab was really nice, but she had a strict policy for attendance. If you were absent, you needed to have a doctor's note when you came back. If you were late, she'd send you to the office to get a pass instead of letting you into class. It taught us to always be on time, but I always had to run to class, so most of my exercise came after PE, not during it. In December, we practiced running laps around the track to prepare for the mile. We called our teacher Coach G because a lot of basketball players were in that class, and they called him Coach G. It sort of stuck with all of us. Coach G wanted us to walk the track and get comfortable with the feel of the squishy flooring on most days, but since Christmas break was coming up, he made us start running until we completed the mile test. On December 14th, we all ran the actual test. I was a good runner, but I had never run a mile with so many people. Our entire class lined up at the starting line of the track. There must have been almost 200 freshmen and sophomores all mixed together. When Coach G said, "Go," we ran, and we kept running until we completed 4 laps. After the 4th lap, we had to run to Coach G to get our time, which we wrote down by our names on his clipboard. The goal was to finish in 10 minutes, but we took a lot of time to stretch and warm up before attempting the test. Like I said, almost 200 of us lined up at the line, so 200 of us all started together. It wasn't a race. It was more like a large gathering, a gathering of sheep, having to shuffle through each other. We shuffled for a bit until the fast ones got to the front and the slow ones in the middle. The ones who didn't care stayed towards the back. After running around different people, I finally made it out of the pack and reached my stride. I ran as fast as I could while still being careful to pace myself just enough to not be totally tired too early. I ran 1, 2, 3 laps. I was doing great. As I started my last lap, I looked around and saw something amazing. There were only 3 people in front of me. Well, only 3 people in front of me that were actually running the mile faster than me. I wanted to pass at least one person to make top 3 in my class as a new student. That would be amazing. I'd never really seen myself as a top 3 in anything, but here I had a chance to be 3rd, 2nd, even 1st. So I ran. I picked up the pace and ran as hard and as fast as I could. I passed the first person ahead of me early into the lap. I sprinted and passed the second person halfway through the lap. I got close to the first place, but they caught on. Someone yelled out that I was gaining on them, and they picked up their own pace. And then the person I just passed got close to me. All 3 of us were neck and neck for a top 3 finish. In the last few feet, I got passed by both. Just before the finish line, I passed one student and ended the mile in 2nd place. All 3 of us went to Coach G for our times, but I didn't really pay attention at that point. I was too tired. I just wrote down whatever fell between the 1st and 3rd place times since we all knew I finished in 2nd. Class ended soon after, and we all walked to the locker rooms together to change for regular classes. After changing back into my normal clothes, I walked outside and saw the whole school walking around. The bell had rung without me realizing it, but I was also too tired to really run to class, so I walked and hoped Mrs. Hullab would let me in if she knew I placed 2nd in the mile race. Everyone seemed so cheery around me after all, There was a certain magic in the air, the kind you only get during Christmas time on a Friday. That was before the song played. Remember, I was new at this time. I'd never heard them play music during passing period at Redwood High. It was just a bell, 5 minutes to walk, and then another bell saying that the class was starting. That day, they played a song. It was popular on the radio at the time, but I didn't really know the words. But when the song started playing, everyone started running. There was a panic, unlike anything I'd ever seen at the school. I asked one of the girls who brushed past me what was happening. "Tardy Sweep, kid, better get moving," she said. Then she was gone. I thought she was kind of cool the way she said it, but she quickly hurried into the classroom and was safe. I was only halfway across campus and still tired from my run, with no chance of really making it to English on time. I was doomed. It would be my first detention ever, and right after such a big moment, too. The song stopped, the bell rang, and the announcement rang out throughout the school. "Attention Redwood students and teachers, this is a tardy sweep. Please lock your doors and have all late students wait to be picked up by a campus official. Thank you." I found myself a bench to sit down and wait. No point in trying to reason with Mrs. Hullab. She was strict about tardiness already. While I sat and waited, I looked around the campus. It was pretty empty with a few people walking around, likely trying to avoid the tardy sweep. The sky was starting to get cloudy, as if it might rain, but I remember the weather that day saying it would be sunny all day. I also swore I could hear bells jingling in the distance, but the school speakers were off. It was such a strange experience, but thinking about it now, it made so much sense. The jingling bells got louder as a red carpet approached my bench. It was large, like most of our school golf carts, but the red cover made it look even larger, almost like a sleigh. I squinted my eyes at the cart to see which security guard was going to pick me up. We had our campus safety officials do the tardy sweeps, and since they were always so nice, I tried to learn their faces and some names. The person driving towards me was dressed in a big red coat with white fur trim around the collar and sleeves. It looked like he was wearing a red hat too. My heart started to race because I couldn't tell who this was, but also because it really looked like Santa Claus was coming towards me. It made me laugh thinking about it. That eased the tension from the whole situation too. The sleigh pulled up to my bench, and the Santa Claus looked at me with a smile. "Ho, ho, ho! Caught in tardy sweep, I see," he said to me. "Yes, sir. I ran the mile for PE, and I didn't have enough time to get to class today," I replied as respectfully as I could. "Well, then that means you get to be my elf helper for the day." "Your elf helper? What's that?" "Ho, ho, ho! Why, it means you'll help me spread Christmas cheer for the rest of the period." I blinked in surprise. Santa Claus had just arrived at my school during a tardy sweep? It was beyond surreal. "Santa, you're really Santa Claus," I stammered. Santa chuckled heartily. "Well, I'm Santa's helper, but close enough. And today you get to be my special helper. It's a tradition in the North Pole, you know." Still somewhat dazed, I nodded, realizing this was a once-in-a-lifetime opportunity. I'd love to help, but what do I need to do? Santa leaned over and whispered, "We're going to spread some holiday magic. I've got this sack full of candy canes and small gifts. We'll surprise students and teachers, make them smile, and remind them that this season is about joy and kindness." With that, Santa handed me a Santa hat and a handful of candy canes. We both hopped onto the red cart, which was now adorned with tinsel and lights, making it look even more like a festive sleigh. As we drove through campus, I couldn't help but grin. Santa with me as his unexpected companion, distributing candy canes and small gifts to surprise students and teachers, laughter and holiday spirit filling the air. At one point, we stopped by the 200 building, where Mrs. Hullab's English class was. I felt a pang of anxiety knowing that class had already started. But Santa whispered, "Watch this." With a twinkle in his eye, Santa rang a small silver bell, and the classroom's door swung open. Mrs. Hullab, who had been in the middle of her lesson, looked up in astonishment. "Santa Claus?" she exclaimed. "Indeed, Mrs. Hullab," Santa replied with a wink. "I've brought a special helper to join your class today." I walked into the classroom wearing the Santa hat, holding a tray of candy canes and feeling like I was in a dream. Mrs. Hullab's stern expression softened, and she welcomed me with a smile. For the rest of the class, I shared my story about the unexpected adventure during the Tardy Sweep, and everyone listened with fascination. I handed out candy canes and small gifts to my new classmates, spreading warmth and holiday cheer. When the bell rang, signaling the end of the period, Santa and I bid farewell to the class. As we left, Santa whispered something to Mrs. Hullab that made her chuckle. I hopped onto the red cart, now feeling like a true elf helper. We continued our journey around the school, leaving behind a trail of smiles and laughter. When the final bell of the day rang, I returned to my bench, realizing that my Tardy Sweep had turned into an unforgettable Christmas adventure. Santa Claus patted me on the back. "Thank you for being my helper today," Santa said, his eyes twinkling. "Remember, the spirit of Christmas is about spreading love and joy to those around you." With that, Santa drove away in his red cart, disappearing into the distance with the sound of jingling bells. I watched, filled with a newfound sense of wonder and the certainty that Christmas miracles could happen when you least expected them.